The note was not written in his hand, but the command was unmistakable. A single address, a discreet clinic, and an envelope of cash. For Akari, the Yakuza heir's wife, it was the end of the life she knew. He was choosing his ex, the daughter of a rival clan boss, and erasing the family they had built. He just didn't understand what he was truly abandoning or how far a woman with nothing left to lose would go. This is the story of Kenji Tanaka, heir to the $2 billion Tanaka-gumi syndicate. It's a world where loyalty is bought with blood, and where a woman's worth is measured by her connections, not her character. But when he cast aside his black American wife and their daughter to reclaim a past love, he ignited a war he never saw coming. Because in the shadows of Tokyo, the quietest people are often the most dangerous. Kenji's world was never his own. From birth, his path was carved by the needs of the Tanaka-gumi. His father, Isao Tanaka, the iron-fisted Oyabun built an empire on construction, gambling, and discreet corporate intimidation. By the time Kenji turned 25, the syndicate controlled a portfolio worth over $2 billion. But this was the 21st century, and the old ways were crumbling. Police crackdowns and anti-Yakuza laws that made it illegal for businesses to even serve them had cut membership by over 90% in 50 years. The Tanaka-gumi wasn't just fighting rivals, it was fighting extinction. This existential fear dictated every decision in the Tanaka household, especially for Kenji, the only son. His value wasn't in his mind or his heart, but in his bloodline. He was the vessel for the family's future. Every interaction, every friendship, and especially every romance was vetted for strategic utility. His first love, Hana Sato, was deemed perfect. The daughter of a mid-tier Sato-gumi captain, she was Yakuza royalty, raised in the same cloistered, violent world. Their teenage romance was a union everyone approved of, a merging of influence, a strengthening of bonds. For Kenji, she was simply the girl he loved. Then during a study abroad year in New York meant to launder the family's international interests, Kenji met Akari Jones. She was a graduate student in art history, sharp, independent, and wholly disconnected from the shadow world he came from. To Kenji, she was freedom incarnate. For 2 years, he built a secret life with her, a life of museums and coffee shops and conversations that weren't about territory or tribute. When Akari became pregnant, Kenji, in a rare act of defiance, married her in a quiet city hall ceremony. He presented it to his father not as a rebellion, but as an opportunity, a clean American wife, a legitimate child, a bridge to a more respectable future. Isao Tanaka saw it for what it was, a profound liability, but with Akari already pregnant, public scandal was the greater threat. He allowed it, but the price was Kenji's complete submission in all other matters. Akari was brought to Tokyo and installed in a secure, luxurious apartment in Minato Ward. She was a ghost in the machine. The other Yakuza wives, bound by their own unspoken codes of silence and survival, viewed her as an outsider twice over, a foreigner and a wife who hadn't been chosen by the clan. She was isolated, her every movement monitored by Kenji's driver, who was really a Kobun assigned to watch her. Her only anchor was her daughter, Mia. For a few years, there was a fragile peace. Kenji, now deeply enmeshed in running the family's legitimate businesses, played the part of a young executive. He came home to Akari and Mia, a sanctuary from the pressure. Mia became his secret joy. He'd sneak in after midnight, still smelling of cigar smoke and tension, and watch her sleep, her existence a quiet rebellion he couldn't articulate. But the outside pressure never stopped. The Sato-gumi, insulted by Kenji's rejection of Hana, had become a thorn in the Tanaka-gumi's side, skirmishing over lucrative construction contracts in Okinawa. Isao Tanaka's health began to fail. The clan's elders grew nervous, their whispers loud enough to hear. A half-foreign child cannot lead. The bloodline is diluted. The Sato girl was the right choice. And then Hana Sato reappeared, not as the teenage girlfriend, but as a formidable player in her own right. Having taken over aspects of her own family's operations, she was polished, connected, and unmistakably Yakuza. At a clan gathering, she cornered Kenji. It wasn't nostalgia she offered, it was a merger. "Our families are bleeding each other dry over scraps," she said, her voice cool. "Your father is dying, my father listens to me. Marry me, unite the groups, and we secure everything for the next generation. Your current situation is a distraction our enemies will exploit." Kenji resisted. He spoke of Akari, of Mia, Hana's smile was thin. You have a child, that is a fact. The child can be provided for, but your wife is a door your enemies will walk through. She is a weakness you can no longer afford. The ultimatum traveled from Hana to the Sato patriarch to Isao Tanaka's sickbed. The decision was made in a room Akari would never enter. The future of the clan outweighed one woman's heart. Kenji, trapped between the empire he was born to save and the family he had chosen, finally bent. He convinced himself it was the only way to protect them all, that removing Akari and Mia from the violent heart of the clan was an act of love. He didn't have the courage to say it to her face. The note, the cash, the clinic address, it was delivered by a stone-faced underling. The message was clear: terminate the pregnancy Akari had just told him about and disappear. The apartment, the accounts, the life she knew would be dissolved. Mia would remain in Japan, raised within the clan, her heritage assimilated. Akari was to vanish. When Akari read the note, the world didn't just end, it shattered. The man she loved, the father of her child, was offering her money to erase their second child and abandon their first. It wasn't just abandonment, it was an annihilation. In that moment, something in her broke, and then something else, something hard and cold, solidified. She looked at Mia, coloring quietly at the table, oblivious. She thought of the invisible walls of her gilded prison, of the whispered slights from the other wives, of the way Kenji's bodyguards always seemed to be between her and the exit. She didn't go to the clinic. She packed a single bag for herself and Mia with only the most ordinary of clothes. She took the envelope of cash, and then she did the one thing no one in the Tanaka-gumi expected. She walked out the front door. Not to flee, but to disappear into the one place they would never think to look for a foreign woman alone. The warren of narrow streets in Sanya, Tokyo's shadow district, a place of day laborers, forgotten elders, and those who had fallen completely off the map. She became a ghost, but a ghost with a purpose and a devastating secret she had yet to reveal. Kenji, believing his problem had been neatly disposed of, proceeded with the arrangements for his union with Hana. The engagement was announced in the subtle ways of their world, a meeting of elders, an exchange of symbolic gifts. He told himself Mia would be fine, that she'd grow up with power and protection. He told himself Akari was safer, freer, away from all this. He almost believed it. Until 3 weeks later, when a plain manila envelope arrived at the Tanaka-gumi headquarters. It contained no note, just two things: a grainy, printed photograph of Akari and Mia alive in a nondescript alley, and beneath it, a positive pregnancy test dated the week after Akari was supposed to have terminated it. The message was as clear as the one he'd sent: you do not control this narrative anymore. The cliffhanger wasn't just that she was alive. It was that she was carrying his heir, a direct challenger to the pure-blooded succession he was trying to secure with Hana, and she was no longer waiting in a cage. She was somewhere in the city's underbelly with his daughter and his unborn child, and she had just declared war. Inside the Tanaka-gumi headquarters, the envelope detonated like a silent bomb. Kenji stared at the photograph, the reality of his miscalculation freezing the blood in his veins. Akari was not just gone, she was hiding in plain sight, a ghost with a cause, and the pregnancy test, it changed everything. The second child, conceived after his betrayal, was no longer a loose end. It was a rival heir, a living, breathing claim against the pure-blooded legacy he was trying to forge with Hana. Panic, sharp and unfamiliar, cut through him. His first order was not to his father or the elders, but to his most trusted driver, Kaito: find her. Before anyone else does, do not let Hana or her people know. But Akari had chosen Sanya for a reason. Once a bustling day laborer district, it was now a dense maze of flop houses, tiny bars, and forgotten souls. Security cameras were scarce, cash was king, and questions were met with a wall of practiced silence. To the salarymen and society ladies of Tokyo, it was an invisible place. To a Yakuza heir used to power and intimidation, it was a fortress of anonymity. Kaito's men, in their crisp suits and obvious vehicles, stuck out like torches in the dark. Their discreet inquiries were met with shrugs and averted eyes. Akari and Mia had vanished into the ecosystem. Meanwhile, in a 6-tatami mat room above a decaying center bathhouse, Akari was building a new kind of strength. The money from Kenji's envelope was her war chest. She used it sparingly, paying for the room in advance, buying simple groceries, and purchasing a cheap, untraceable burner phone. Her art history degree, once a symbol of a different life, now gave her a keen eye for detail and pattern. She began to document everything she remembered: names, dates, the faces of Kenji's associates, the locations of off-the-books Tanaka-gumi offices. She wasn't just hiding, she was conducting intelligence. Her first ally came from an unexpected place: the owner of the tiny, vinyl record cafe where she sometimes took Mia for a warm drink. Old man Yamada was a retired journalist, his career broken years earlier when he dug too close to a political scandal with Yakuza connections. He recognized the look in Akari's eyes, not just fear, but a simmering, focused anger. He didn't ask her story. He simply said, "The walls have ears, but the records only play what we spin." He became her conduit to the outside world, a source of safe information, and her first lesson in the power of the press as a weapon. Weeks passed. The engagement between the Tanaka and Sato clans proceeded with grim ceremony. Kenji moved through it like a man in a dream, his mind constantly on the photograph. Hana noticed his distraction. "You're thinking about her," she stated flatly during a fitting for her wedding kimono. "She's a phantom. Phantoms can't hurt you unless you give them substance." But Hana, ever the strategist, had already activated her own network. She knew a hidden wife was a narrative flaw, and in their world, narrative was power. She didn't want Akari found for a reunion, she wanted her found for permanent disappearance. The pressure from both sides of his life was crushing Kenji. He made his first major mistake. Desperate for a lead, he authorized a more aggressive search in Sanya, using lower-level, rougher foot soldiers. This created noise. A clumsy attempt to bribe a neighborhood street vendor ended in a shoving match. The disturbance was minor, but it was noticed by a beat reporter for a local tabloid, a man named Sato who fed on tales of gangster friction. He filed it away as a curious footnote. Back in the tiny room, Mia asked a question that broke Akari's heart. "When is Papa coming? Does he know where our new house is?" Akari knelt, holding her daughter's small face. "Papa is lost right now, baby, but we are not. We are together, and we are strong." That night she made a decision. Protection wasn't enough. She needed leverage. She needed to go on the offensive. Using old man Yamada's antiquated but secure computer, she crafted a new message. Not a desperate plea, but a coldly formal offer. She outlined two scenarios. Scenario 1, Kenji publicly acknowledges Mia and the unborn child as his legitimate heirs, provides a legally binding trust for their welfare independent of the Tanaka-gumi, and grants Akari a formal divorce with a substantial, clean settlement. In return, she remains silent, disappears forever, and the Tanaka-gumi avoids a scandal. Scenario 2, she releases her documented diary, along with the photo of the abortion clinic note and cash, to a contact at a major international newspaper. She would burn his carefully constructed legitimacy to the ground on the eve of his dynastic union. She sent this ultimatum not to the headquarters, but to Kenji's private, encrypted email, an address she remembered from a lifetime ago. The subject line was a single word: negotiation. When Kenji read it in his office, the sheer, audacious clarity of it stole his breath. This was not the broken woman he thought he'd discarded. This was a negotiator, a dangerous one. She had studied his world and identified its weakest point: its desperate need for a facade of legitimacy in the face of crippling anti-Yakuza laws. A public scandal involving her abandoned pregnant foreign wife wouldn't just be gossip. It would give the police and the banks all the pretext they needed to freeze assets and intensify scrutiny. He was still reeling when Kaito entered, his face grave. "We have a problem. The Sato reporter has been sniffing around Sanya. He's heard whispers of a foreign woman with a child. He doesn't have names, but he's digging." And Kaito hesitated. "There are other inquiries. Subtler, they don't smell like police. They smell like Sato-gumi." Hana, she was closing in from the other side. Kenji was now trapped in a pincer movement between the woman he betrayed and the woman he promised to marry. Both wanted something from Akari. One wanted recognition, the other wanted erasure. He had to move. He typed a reply to Akari's email, his fingers unsteady. "A meeting, neutral ground, just you and me. Name the place." He needed to see her, to gauge the truth in her eyes, to try and reclaim some control. Akari's reply came an hour later. She named a location, but it was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. The meeting was set for the observation deck of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building in Shinjuku, a massively public place, swarming with tourists and security cameras, a location where violence or intimidation was impossible. It was the territory of the ordinary citizen, a world away from the back rooms and private clubs of the Yakuza. She was dictating the terms on her field. The day of the meeting, Kenji felt a stranger to himself. He dismissed his guards, a nearly unthinkable act for an heir. As he rode the elevator to the 45th floor, he was just another man in a suit. When he stepped onto the deck and saw her, leaning against the glass, looking out over the endless city, a tremor went through him. She was thinner, her hair tied back simply, her posture not of a victim, but of someone waiting. Mia was not with her. He approached. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the chasm of his betrayal between them as vast as the cityscape. "You look well," he finally said, the words hollow. "Don't," she replied, her voice low and steady, not turning to look at him. "We're not here for small talk. You received my terms." "Are you insane?" he hissed, stepping closer but keeping his voice down. "You think you can blackmail the Tanaka-gumi? Do you know what they will do to you if they find you?" Now she turned. Her eyes were dry, clear, and held a fire he had never seen. You are Kenji, you sent the note, you made the choice, and now you're afraid because the choice has consequences you didn't anticipate. I'm not blackmailing a syndicate, I'm negotiating with the father of my children, one last time." He saw then the absolute resolve. There was no love left to appeal to, no guilt to manipulate, only a cold, transactional clarity. He tried a different tack. "Mia, she should be with her family, in her home. You're keeping her in some slum." Her home was a cage, and her family tried to throw her mother away like garbage, Akari interrupted, her composure cracking for just a second. "You have no right to speak of her. Your right to her ended with that envelope. Now you have a choice. Do we have a deal, or do I send the files to my contact at The Guardian? The reporter is very interested. He's waiting for my call." Kenji's mind raced. He could have her taken right now in this public place. Impossible. He could agree and then double-cross her. She clearly had contingencies. The weight of his gilded world felt suddenly like a coffin. I need time," he stammered, the air reduced to a supplicant. "You have 48 hours, she said. She placed a cheap burner phone on the ledge between them. "This number, your answer." Then she walked away, melting into a crowd of German tourists without a backward glance. Kenji stood alone, the city sprawling beneath him, feeling smaller and more exposed than he ever had in his life. He had come to regain control, and instead he had handed her the final piece of her victory, the confirmation that she held all the power. As he rode the elevator down, his own phone vibrated. It was Hana. Her message was brief. "We need to talk. The wedding timeline is moving up. My father is impatient." He was out of time, and as his chauffeured car pulled away, he didn't notice the nondescript sedan that slid into traffic 2 cars behind him. Inside, Hana Sato watched, her expression unreadable. She had not followed Kenji. She had been waiting for Akari. The ghost had finally surfaced. And now that she had a face she could be dealt with, the game had just become a 3-way war, and the most ruthless player had just entered the field. Hana Sato did not follow Kenji home from the government building. Her car trailed Akari's careful, meandering route back to Sanya. She watched as the woman who threatened her future disappeared into the warren of alleys. A satellite phone call was made. "I have a location grid. Stand by. Do not engage until I understand the full picture." Hana was a strategist. Brute force was a last resort. Information was the real weapon. She needed to know what Akari had, who she talked to, and what her real demands were. Kenji, meanwhile, returned to a fortress of expectation. His father, Isao, summoned him to the sick room. The old man, propped on pillows, his voice a rasp but his eyes still sharp as broken glass, had heard whispers. "The foreign woman lives, and she carries a child," Isao stated, not asked. "You have turned a personal failure into a clan vulnerability. The Sato patriarch is asking questions I should not have to answer." Kenji tried to explain his plan to handle it quietly. Isao cut him off with a weak but dismissive wave. Quiet is no longer an option. Hana knows she is not a wife to be managed. She is a partner with her own army. You will bring this to a close before the wedding, however it must be done. The unspoken command hung in the medicinal air: eliminate the problem. But Kenji was fractured. The sight of Akari, her steely resolve, the mention of Mia, it had cracked the facade of the dutiful heir. That night, he went to the room that had been Mia's nursery in the Minato apartment, now stripped bare. He found a single, forgotten pink hair clip under a radiator. He held it in his palm, and for the first time, the full weight of his betrayal crushed him. He wasn't protecting anyone. He was destroying his own family to appease a dying empire. A dangerous thought began to form. What if he said no? Akari, back in her small room, felt no victory. The meeting had drained her. Mia, sensing her mother's tension, was clingy and quiet. Old man Yamada knocked on her door later that evening, his face grave. A car, black, tinted windows, not your husband's style. It cruised the main street twice after you returned. They were mapping. Akari's blood ran cold. Kenji had promised 48 hours. This was someone else. Hana. The realization was instant. The predator she hadn't fully accounted for was now on her scent. She activated her contingency. Using Yamada's computer, she uploaded her encrypted files, the diary, the photo of the note, to a cloud server. She set a dead man's switch, a timed email to her guardian contact that would send the decryption key if she didn't log in to cancel it every 12 hours. Her leverage was now automated. It could not be stolen from her, it could only be unleashed. The next 36 hours were a silent siege. Kenji, torn, did nothing. Hana's surveillance tightened like a noose. Akari rarely left the room. The pressure cooker was ready to explode. It did so at a seemingly innocuous location, a public children's clinic in a neighboring ward. Akari, her pregnancy requiring a checkup she could no longer avoid, took Mia for an appointment. It was a calculated risk, using a clinic far from Sanya. Hana's people were watching. As Akari and Mia exited the clinic, a sleek, black sedan pulled smoothly to the curb. The rear window slid down. Hana Sato looked out, her expression one of polite curiosity. "Mrs. Tanaka," she called, using the abandoned name like a weapon. "May I offer you and your daughter a ride? It looks like rain." Akari froze, her hand tightening around Mia's. This was the confrontation she feared, not with Kenji, but with the engine of her destruction. "We are fine," Akari said, her voice steady. "Please," Hana said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I insist. We have much to discuss about the future." A large man in a tailored suit emerged from the front passenger seat, holding the door open. It was not a request. It was an elegant kidnapping in broad daylight. At that moment, Kenji's car, driven by a frantic Kaito, screeched around the corner. He had been trying to find Akari to give his answer, tracking the burner phone's general area. He saw the standoff, saw Hana's car, saw the fear on Akari's face. Something primal overrode every clan dictate, every strategic calculation. He threw his door open and strode forward. "Hana, what is this?" Hana's smile turned icy. "Kenji, how fortunate. We can discuss this as a family." She looked between them. "Get in, all of you, unless you want this scene to become tomorrow's headline." Trapped, Kenji and Akari, with a confused Mia between them, were ushered into the spacious back of Hana's armored vehicle. It was a grotesque family reunion. The car pulled away, soundproofed partition up, driver and guards sealed in the front. Hana got straight to the point. "This ends today. Akari, you will sign these papers." She produced a document from her bag. "It is a sworn statement renouncing any claim for yourself or your children to the Tanaka name or assets. In return, you receive a one-time payment of $500,000. You take your daughter and you leave Japan forever. The pregnancy will be terminated as originally arranged." Akari stared at the paper, then at Hana, then at Kenji. "And if I refuse?" "Then," Hana said softly, "the unfortunate realities of your situation will become apparent. A foreign woman in a dangerous neighborhood, involved with known criminals, accidents happen. Your daughter would become a ward of the state. My family has influence in those offices." Kenji found his voice. "Hana, you can't." "I can," she snapped, the veneer of control slipping. "You had one job, Kenji, clean your mess. You didn't. You let sentimentality become a strategic cancer. Now I am cutting it out." She turned back to Akari. The money is more than you deserve, sign it. Akari looked at Kenji, her eyes asking the only question that mattered, are you part of this? His face was a mask of anguish, but he said nothing. In that silence, Akari had her answer. The last flicker of hope died. She reached for the pen. But then Mia, who had been listening with wide, intelligent eyes, spoke. Papa, is this lady making Mama sad? Is she the reason you left? The simple, devastating question shattered the tense atmosphere. Kenji flinched, as if struck. Hana looked at the child with cold distaste. Akari pulled Mia close. It's okay, baby. She looked at Hana, a new terrifying calm settling over her. I will not sign, and you will not touch my children. If anything happens to me or to Mia or to this baby, every secret I have, every name, every date, every photograph will be published in 9 major international newspapers. The dead man's switch is already active. Your wedding will be front-page news, but not the kind you want. Hana's composure cracked completely. You bluff. Test me, Akari whispered, the words a promise. Kenji finally erupted. Enough. He slammed his hand against the partition. Driver, stop the car. The vehicle pulled over. Kenji looked at Hana, his decision made in the fire of the moment. Get out. Hana stared at him in disbelief. What? The engagement is off. The merger is off. Tell your father whatever you want. Get out of this car, now. The power dynamics in the soundproof chamber inverted violently. Hana, realizing she had overplayed her hand and pushed Kenji into a corner where he chose his discarded family over the clan's future, was momentarily speechless. With a look of pure venom directed at both of them, she opened the door and stepped out onto the curb. The door shut, and the car was silent, save for Mia's quiet sniffling. Kenji looked at Akari, his breath ragged. I'm sorry for all of it. Your terms I accept. But it was too late. The damage was done. Akari looked at him, not with forgiveness, but with a weary finality. Your acceptance is no longer relevant. This isn't a negotiation between us anymore. You made it a war when you sent her. She nodded toward the window where Hana stood, already on her phone. And now she's in it. You protected us from her today. You won't be able to tomorrow. Drive us back to Sanya, then leave us alone. The car ride back was silent. When Akari and Mia disappeared into the alley, Kenji felt a desolation deeper than any clan disgrace. He had, in one impulsive act, likely destroyed the Tanaka-gumi's future, and he had still lost them. He was right about one thing: Hana was already moving. Her call was not to her father, but to the tabloid reporter Sato. She fed him a sanitized, explosive tip. Tanaka-gumi Kenji Tanaka has a secret foreign wife and love child. He's hiding them in Sanya while preparing to marry Sato-gumi heiress Hana Sato in a sham union. The wife is pregnant again. He's trying to force her to abort. There's your human interest story. She gave him Akari's alias and the location of the Sento bathhouse. She wasn't just attacking Kenji, she was painting a target on Akari's back, knowing a media scandal would force the Tanaka-gumi to act ruthlessly to shut it down, doing her dirty work for her. The story broke online at midnight. By 6 a.m. it was trending. The headline was brutal: Yakuza Heir's secret family abandoned in Tokyo slum. It contained just enough truth to be credible and just enough salacious detail to go viral. It named Sanya. It mentioned a mysterious foreign woman and a child. In the Tanaka-gumi headquarters, panic was total. Elders pounded tables. Isao Tanaka, in a fit of rage that shattered a bedside vase, gave a new, unequivocal order. The woman and the problem disappear. Permanently. Today, no more mistakes. In her tiny room, Akari saw the news on Yamada's old television. She knew what it meant. The careful secrecy was over. The clans would be coming, not to negotiate, but to erase. She woke Mia, dressed her quickly, grabbing the go bag. It was time to run. But as she opened the door, she found not Yakuza enforcers, but Kenji, alone, unarmed, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. They're coming, he said. Both clans. The police will be swarming here too for the press. You have to come with me, now. Akari backed away, shielding Mia. So you can finish the job yourself. No, he said, and his voice broke. So I can get you to the airport, so I can put you on a plane somewhere safe. It's the only thing I have left to give you. Please, let me do this one thing. He was choosing them over everything. It was the moment she had wanted for months, but looking at him, seeing the ruin of the man she once loved, she knew it was a suicide mission. The clans would hunt him for this. He was signing his own death warrant. The wail of police sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer. The media and the mob were descending on Sanya. They were out of time. Akari made her choice. She took Mia's hand, looked at Kenji, and gave a single, sharp nod. They fled into the dawn, a fractured family on the run, with the combined might of two Yakuza clans and the hungry Japanese media now in pursuit. The private war had just erupted into a very public firestorm, and there was no going back. Escape from Sanya was not a chase scene from a film. It was a desperate, silent slip through cracks that were rapidly closing. Kenji, abandoning his own car, led Akari and Mia through a series of interconnected back alleys known only to the district's lifelong residents. He used cash from his pockets to pay a laundry truck driver he vaguely recognized, and the three of them huddled among bundles of sheets as the vehicle rattled away from the growing symphony of sirens and shouted press questions. They emerged in a quiet residential neighborhood miles away, where Kaito waited with a different, unmarked vehicle. The loyalty of this one driver, a man who had also grown fond of Mia's chatter during school runs, was now the only thread holding Kenji's world together. The plan was simple and fraught with risk. Get to Hainda Airport, use one of Kenji's legitimate, corporate-held credit cards to purchase 3 last-minute tickets to Vancouver, a destination with no extradition treaty with Japan and a large, anonymous metropolitan area. But the clock was against them. The tabloid story had unleashed not just journalists, but also the organized crime task force, who saw a public scandal as the perfect leverage to pressure the Tanaka-gumi. Roadblocks were being set up on major arteries. Airport security was alerted to look for a woman matching Akari's description with a young child. En route, Kenji made 2 calls on a new burner phone. The first was to his father's senior advisor. His message was blunt: "I am leaving, the heir is dead, protect the clan as you see fit." He was formally renouncing his position, an act of *mechake* or severance that was the ultimate dishonor. The line went silent, then disconnected. The second call was to his private banker in Switzerland, initiating an irreversible wire transfer of $15 million from his personal, offshore holdings into a new account in Akari's name. It was the bulk of his independent wealth, entirely separate from clan coffers. It was his penance and their lifeline. Akari, listening, said nothing. The magnitude of what he was surrendering was not a gift. It was a down payment on a debt that could never be fully repaid. They avoided the main terminal. Using his remaining influence and Kaito's knowledge of service entrances, Kenji managed to get them to a private hangar used by Hansung Group, a Tanaka-gumi affiliate. A small jet was being prepped for a corporate flight to Seoul. With a combination of remaining authority and sheer desperate bluff, Kenji convinced the crew to alter the flight plan to Vancouver with a refueling stop in Anchorage. As they boarded, the tension was a physical thing. Mia, exhausted and scared, clung to Akari, her eyes wide as she looked at the airplane. On the tarmac, under the gray morning sky, came the final moment. Kenji handed Akari an envelope containing passports, real, high-quality forgeries he'd secured weeks earlier in a fit of paranoid contingency planning, cash, and the Swiss account details. "The pilot is clean, he knows nothing. You'll be met in Vancouver by a lawyer. He's expecting you. He'll handle everything from there." Akari looked at him, standing on the asphalt. "You're not coming." He shook his head. "If I board that plane, they will move heaven and earth to drag it back. They'll claim you kidnapped me. This only works if I stay, if I face what I've done." He looked at Mia, his eyes glistening. "Be good for your mother, be brave." Mia pulled away from Akari and ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his legs. He knelt, holding her tightly, his face buried in her hair for a long, silent moment. When he pulled back, his face was wet. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you, Papa," Mia whispered back. He stood, gave Akari one last, unreadable look, a mixture of anguish, love, and farewell, then turned and walked back toward Kaito's car. He did not look back. Akari, holding her daughter's hand, boarded the plane. As the door sealed, the world she had known for years, a world of gilded cages and silent wars, fell away below. Kenji's reckoning was swift and brutal. He surrendered himself directly to the organized crime task force, not as an heir, but as an informant. In exchange for immunity from prosecution for himself and protection for Kaito, he provided detailed recorded testimony on the Tanaka-gumi's and Sato-gumi's operations, focusing on the financial structures and the specific acts of intimidation related to the failed merger and the threats against Akari. He did not give up street-level soldiers or violent secrets that would trigger gang wars. He gave the authorities what they truly wanted: a legal roadmap to dismantle the clan's economic engines. The fallout was catastrophic for the syndicates. Based on Kenji's testimony, banks froze dozens of accounts. Key front companies were raided. The planned Tanaka-Sato merger evaporated in a cloud of scandal and legal jeopardy. Hana Sato, her ambition turned to ash, was forced by her own family to withdraw from public life, her political marriage value obliterated. Isao Tanaka, upon hearing of his son's betrayal, suffered a final stroke and died within the week. The Tanaka-gumi, leaderless and financially crippled, fractured into squabbling factions. Kenji Tanaka, the heir, had become the instrument of his dynasty's ruin. He served no prison time, but entered a protected witness program, a ghost in his own country. The Yakuza world issued a *mechake* order of its own. He was dead to them. Any former brother who saw him was obligated to kill him on sight. He lived in a safe house, a man with no past and no future, his only consolation the knowledge that he had, in the end, chosen correctly. In Vancouver, Akari Jones gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Ken. With the resources Kenji had provided, she bought a modest home, enrolled Mia in a good school, and began the slow process of healing. The lawyer connected her with a Canadian security firm that helped her establish a new airtight identity. She never spoke to Kenji again, but she did once have the lawyer forward a single photograph: Mia and baby Ken sitting on a sun-drenched lawn, smiling. No return address. No note. It was not forgiveness. It was a report: we live. 5 years later, a small gallery in Montreal held an opening for a new artist. The exhibition was titled Gilded Ghosts, Fragments from a Silent War. The pieces were stunning, delicate, haunting mixed-media works incorporating traditional Japanese washi paper, gold leaf, and fragments of modern, impersonal documents. One piece featured a single, perfect pink hair clip suspended over a reproduced, crumpled note in Japanese. Another showed the blurred, beautiful skyline of Tokyo, seen as if through a rain-spattered window. The artist, who gave interviews only via email, was named Akira Jones. In her statement, she wrote, "These works are not about violence. They are about the architecture of cages, both visible and invisible, and the silence that fills them." The show was a critical success. A prominent art critic wrote, "Jones channels a profound personal history into a universal language of constraint and resilience. There is a deep, unsettling knowledge here of systems of power and the cost of escaping them." Back in Tokyo, in a small, unmarked apartment, a man read the digital review of that exhibition on a secured tablet. He zoomed in on the photograph of the art, on the familiar, painful symbolism. He saw the hair clip. He saw the skyline he could never walk again. He did not smile, but a deep, settled peace finally touched his eyes. She had not just survived. She had transformed the pain into something beautiful. She had reclaimed her narrative entirely. He closed the tablet. His own life was a small, quiet thing now. He taught English part-time at a community center under his new name. He had no family, no legacy, no power. But he had, at the very last moment, learned the worth of what he had thrown away. And in ensuring its survival, he had found a sliver of redemption. The powerful crime heir who abandoned his family for an old flame had indeed lost everything forever: his empire, his name, his place in the world. But in that loss, he finally understood the value of what he had sacrificed, and that understanding was the only thing of true worth he had left. The story closes not with a reunion, but with a parallel existence. Two lives, forever scarred and separated, moving forward in the quiet aftermath of a storm they once created together. The Hook's promise was fulfilled. He learned her worth only when she was gone forever, and that lesson became the defining truth of his diminished life. The echoes of their war faded, leaving behind art, a new family across an ocean, and the hollowed-out shell of a criminal empire, a perfect, painful payoff to a tale of betrayal and consequence. So what does this story of a Yakuza heir an abandoned wife, and a shattered empire truly reveal. At its core, it's a stark lesson in miscalculation. Kenji Tanaka believed he was trading one family for another to save a legacy. He saw Akari and Mia as variables in a business equation, and Hana Sato as the solution to a strategic problem. But in the cold calculus of organized crime, he forgot the one element that can never be fully controlled: the human spirit pushed beyond breaking point. Akari's transformation from a hidden wife into a formidable strategist, an artist, and a survivor proves that the greatest threat to any closed system isn't a rival gang or a police task force. It's the overlooked person who finally decides they have nothing left to lose. This narrative also holds up a dark mirror to the insular world of the Yakuza itself. In its desperate attempt to preserve a pure bloodline and maintain traditional power structures, the Tanaka-gumi set in motion the very chain of events that led to its financial ruin and fracturing. The system designed to ensure loyalty and continuity became the engine of its own destruction. It's a poignant reminder that institutions built on exclusion and betrayal are inherently fragile, no matter how gilded their surface. For Akari and for the countless other marginalized spouses in the shadows of such worlds, the story is one of reclamation. It wasn't just about escaping a gilded cage or securing financial safety. It was about reclaiming her narrative, her voice, and her ability to define her own worth. Her art, born from pain, became her final and most powerful declaration of independence. She didn't just leave, she transformed her experience into something that speaks to others, turning private suffering into public meaning. Kenji's journey is perhaps the most classically tragic. He gained the clarity to see his wife's worth only after he had orchestrated her abandonment, and he could only secure her future by destroying his own. His redemption was not found in forgiveness or reunion, but in the total acceptance of consequence. He learned that legacy isn't about bloodlines or empires, but about the choices you make when the cost is everything you hold dear. In the end, this isn't just a story about the Yakuza. It's a story about value, how we assign it, how we fail to see it in the people closest to us, and how we often only recognize it in the devastating silence of its absence. It asks us a lingering question: what or who in your own life are you failing to value until it's potentially too late? We explore these deep human stories so we can all reflect on the invisible architectures of power and love in our own lives. If this documentary resonated with you, if you felt the weight of Akari's silence or the tragedy of Kenji's late awakening, then share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your shares and discussions are what help this channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the stories that remind us what it means to be human. Thank you for watching. Until next time.